Right.
Uh,
So, Mr. Ben Lesser, it's a real privilege for me to meet you.
Thank you. Likewise.
I've been trying to meet someone like you for years, and as you can imagine, it's kind of difficult. And I came across you for the first time a couple months ago, in some wonderful YouTube videos, and I was compelled to reach out. And lo and behold, I talked to your daughter. I sent in an email, and as I said, this is a great privilege for me.
Okay, Jason. What would you like to know? You want to question me and I'll
Well,
answer
well,
what?
I was hoping to have kind of a little bit more just of an introduction, and I was hoping maybe later on this week, as I was mentioning to Gail, depending on your schedule, I was hoping to have more of an in-depth, more of a formal interview, if that coincides with your schedule coming up this week.
Okay, to tell you my story will take 2 hours.
I have five. I'll have as many as you need from me.
So you
Uh,
want to listen to the whole thing or you just want to question me?
No, no, I want, you know what? I would like to uh listen to how about the whole story now? I was trying to get your book in and I couldn't get it in time. And Gail informed me don't do it on Amazon. And so I'm going to be doing it through leaving a donation on
Yes,
Of the
she'll
foundation.
to the foundation. Yeah.
right, the foundation will mail it to you. Will autograph it.
Oh, that's wonderful. I have a lot of books that are autographed by some of my most favorite authors. This will rank up there with my most favorite.
Okay.
So I want to be quiet and I want to let you speak.
Gail, you gonna show any pictures?
No,
No
I
pictures.
can't show pictures now.
He wants the
So,
whole story. I can pick it, show it.
um, hi, Jason.
Hi there.
You want to have Ben's whole story now?
If I can do it at a later time when Ben is more ready. I don't want to I feel like I've kind of put Ben on the spot. Whenever Ben is ready, um,
He could do it, but you know what? Um, are you going to be, since you're recording it, I could send you the pictures and you could insert them
yes,
in
yeah,
certain
certainly.
places, and then you'll have the whole video of it.
Yes. And I was looking for the second. So for now, I just want to obviously learn more about Ben from Ben's, now that I have him here. And then I was hoping to send an interview into, um, the New York Times, because I'm disturbed to find out that a lot of people, when I mentioned this video, there were some. I have a famous scientist friend who's Jewish, and he jumped up and down. And then some of the other people I'm talking to, they kind of acquiesced and that said, "Well, Jason, why would you want to do that kind of an interview?" And I'm flummoxed to understand that. Why would I not want to?
I agree.
This is what kind of worries me right now.
The world has to know what went on. I know they're trying to deny it. That's the main reason why I need people like you to continue to show those stories, not to allow them to die. Okay, I'll tell you my story.
Absolutely. I
But
promise to do that too.
I feel a little handicapped because I don't have the
Okay, I'll
pictures.
take the time and do it now. I'll take the
All
time to
right,
do it.
please. I want Gail to show the pictures behind the story.
Thank
So
you.
she's gonna do it. Anyway, I was born in Krakow, Poland, Jason. In Krakow, Poland, a beautiful city. big Jewish community in Krakow. My father's business was wine and syrup. He had a wine and syrup manufacturing. He also had a chocolate factory. He was the first one to manufacture chocolate-covered wafers, something like Kit Kat, only in the shape of little animals, rabbits, bears, and tinfoil on it. Every time my father would come home from work, us kids would search his pockets. He always made sure to have some goodies.
I like that.
Anyway, we lived, I was, actually we had two homes. One was in Krakow, where in the winter, we would go to school in Krakow, Poland. My mother's side of the family comes from Munkacs, Hungary. So every summer she would take us kids to Munkacs, to her family. So in the winter, we'd come back to Krakow to go to school. So technically we had two homes. Beautiful life in Hungary, especially. So one day, the whole buildings that we lived in a 3-story apartment house. The whole building started to shake and rattle. So I ran to the window to see what happened. And I saw tanks were rolling down the street. Following the tanks, they were half tracks. And every few steps, a soldier would jump out of the half track, get on the sidewalk, and that's how they occupied the city. There was no fighting. And following them were the Wehrmacht with their shiny black boots and their goose steps. It was quite impressionable. Right after they passed, my father called us kids into the dining room, sat us down on chairs, and said, "Okay, from this moment on, there are no more kids. You're all adults. You will obey, you're going to listen, you're going to do exactly what we tell you, and no backtalk." And this is how we grew up overnight.
Wow.
I was about 10 and a half at the time. And yeah, I was about 10 and a half. And well, after they passed, after my father spoke to us on the 5th day of occupation of Krakow, we found out what Nazi brutality was all about. A truck pulls up to the gate of our building, and they started to bang, and the super came running out 5 a.m. in the morning. What? All they wanted to know is where the Jewish people live. Bunch of soldiers. And he was quick to oblige. He showed them our apartment and our neighbor's apartment. There were two Jewish people in the building. They came breaking down the door, running in. It was 5 a.m. They pistol whipped us while we were in bed. In their hands, they had open sacks, and they were screaming at us, "Throw in all your valuables, money, gold, silver, anything they can find of value." They were throwing it into the truck. And they were beating up my father to open up the safe. While while this is going on, we hear a screaming from our neighbor's apartment. My sister Lola and I ran out through the kitchen door into their neighbor's kitchen door, and when we came in, we saw this in front of our eyes. This monster was holding an infant boy. It was a 2-month-old little boy that was born to the parents. He was holding the infant boy by its legs.
Somehow I cannot find.
And saying, make him shut up. The parents, the daughters was screaming, our baby, don't hurt our baby. With a smirk on his face, you can see he was enjoying what he was doing. He smashes the baby's head into a doorpost, killing it instantly. We all jumped on him, and the other soldiers heard something was going on. They came running in. They pistol whipped us, pulled us off him. They were a little shocked themselves to see what happened. And they said, okay, Hans, let's go. So they gathered up all their valuables, threw it in a sack, and threw the sack into the truck, and they took off. That was the 5th day of occupation. And from that day on, new ordinances started coming in daily. Jewish people had to wear a Star of David from the age of 4 on up. Excuse me.
Of course.
Excuse me, this is Gail. I'm having problems with the PowerPoint, so I'm not able to get it up. It'll be a few minutes, hopefully.
Okay.
Okay?
Okay.
All right, and meanwhile, I'll tell you. An ordinance came in that the Jewish people may no longer reside in Krakow. But they gave us a choice. If you wanted to live in Krakow, you had to go inside a ghetto. I hope you know what a ghetto was.
Yes.
Bad place. But they gave us a choice. If you did not want to go into the ghetto, you can go to a small community outside of Krakow, but in the city you cannot live unless you're in the ghetto. Well, my father was preparing to go inside the ghetto. His whole family went into the ghetto, numbering over 200. They all went into the ghetto. While my father is packing, a young man walks up to him. He said, by the name of Michael Lieber. He says, Mr. Lesser, you know how I feel about Lola, my sister Lola. I love her. Someday I'd love to marry her. But do me a favor, come to the same community where my parents and I are moving to, called Nyepalomice. Well, my father gave him a choice to go to the ghetto or Nyepalomice. He chose Nyepalomice. That was miracle one, because all the people who went into the Krakow ghetto, a few months later, they were all put in trains and trucks and trains and taken to Belzec, an extermination camp. And everyone from the ghetto was exterminated in Belzec. my father chose Neapolomice. That was a savings. Our lives were saved. In Neapolomice, my father, on the way of Neapolomice, we find out that my father had 1,000 American dollars he saved up for a rainy day. That was a lot of money in those days. He took a religious book and he pasted it in between the pages, and he put it in a sack full of Jewish books. And we're loading up the wagon and we're leaving Krakow to go to Neapolomice. An hour out of the city, we're being stopped. Halt! And two husky Nazis jump on the wagon. The first thing they wanted to know, sorry.
That's okay.
Do you have any Jewish literature? Do you have any Jewish literature, books? And they saw two sacks full of books. They picked them up and they heaved it on the side of the road. They had a mountain full of Jewish books. They were going to have a bonfire after everybody left.
Awful.
My sister Lola spoke a beautiful German, and she walks up to him and she says, "Look, my father is a writer. He wrote his autobiography. Let him keep this one book." You understand which book she wanted. And he looked at her. He liked the way she spoke German. He says, "Okay, I'll give you 5 minutes. If you can find it, okay, you can keep it." Well, the whole family started to jump on the way on the mountain of books. All these books look alike. They're brown or black, leather bound. After 5 minutes, he chased us away. We couldn't without a book.
That's too bad.
My father is coming to a new community without a penny to his name. Not like he can get a job because Jewish people are not allowed to be hired. How is he going to feed the family?
Yeah.
And when we arrived to that farmhouse, the apple orchard farmer lived on one side. The other side was for us. It was just one big room. And Michael heard what happened to my father, that he lost all the money. So he brought him a sack full of flour, 100 pounds of flour, figuring he'll be able to bake bread to feed the family. When my father saw the flour, his face lit up. Instead of, okay, this is the house. You see it?
Yeah, sure do. Beautiful drawing.
What? All right, between the two apartments, there was a baking oven. So my father's face lit up and he saw the flour. Yeah. Instead of baking bread to feed the family, he started to bake pretzels, white pretzels. All you need for pretzels is flour, water, and salt. And those ingredients he had. Now he took those pretzels to the neighboring bars and offered it for sale.
Wow.
It was a novelty, and they started to buy the pretzels.
What a genius.
Now my father had some income, and he was able to start to bake bread and all kind of other cakes and cookies. He became a little baker in that community.
That's
I
awesome.
remember I was 12 years old, baking with my father in that community. To this day, I still remember some of the items that I baked for my family. Well, this went on for about a year, and Michael and Lola get married. And in the marriage, the pictures that you see here, those were the wedding guests. Out of all these people in this picture, only 3 of us survived.
3.
Michael, Lola, and I. That was me. The rest of the family, everybody else was killed. My little brother in the white suit is leaning against my mother. My God, only the 3 of us remained.
Jesus. What was your brother's name, Ben?
My brother was Moishi,
Mushi.
but he didn't survive. My brother, my sister, no, we had a family of 7. Everybody except Lola and I were only 2 survivors. So Lola and Michael got married, and after the wedding, they moved out into a duplex. One side of the duplex, all right, those are the pictures that my family were going back. I guess Gail showed you now.
Oh, there's your dad.
These are my father, my mother, my little brother, my oldest brother, Moshe, my sister, Lola, my sister, Goldie, and this is me and my little brother, Tuli. Out of the whole family, only I and my sister, Lola, survived.
Lola.
The others were all slaughtered by the Nazis. And Michael and Lola, after the wedding, moved into a duplex. One side of the duplex was the owner, and the other side of the duplex was Lola and Michael. Now, the owner happened to be the mayor of Neapolomice. And one night he comes home, he says, Michael, Lola, save yourselves. I heard the rumor there is going to be a raid against the Jewish people tonight or tomorrow night. When Michael heard that, he went out and he hired a wagon with the driver, and we snuck out in the middle of the night. The only place we can go to was a city called Bochnia. Bochnia had a ghetto. That meant we had to go inside the ghetto. Bochnia ghetto had a very bad reputation. Every so often, 2 or 3 dump trucks would come in the middle of the night into the ghetto. And the Nazis would go from house to house, pull out the children from their beds and throw them into these dump trucks. After they filled up the 2 or 3 dump trucks, they would start to pull out of the ghetto. Obviously, the parents were running behind these trucks and screaming for their babies. But these cultured people had machine guns at the end of each truck. And they would mow down the parents running behind these trucks for the screaming for the children. That resonated throughout Europe. Stay away from Bochnia Ghetto because of these atrocities. But we have no choice. We had to go into the ghetto. And it's a good thing we did go into the ghetto, because that night, later that night, in Nyepalomice, there was a raid. They went from house to house and pulled out the Jewish people, threw them into these trucks, and took them to the forest. The men were given shovels, they dug a ditch, and everyone was slaughtered, everyone was shot. How do we know this? Lola and I survived the war. We went back to Nyepalomice, the two of us, to find out what happened to all the Jewish people. The farmers were telling us, as they were going into the forest to pick mushrooms and berries to sell in the market in the morning, they saw these trucks pull in, and they were hiding behind trees, and they saw everything that happened. They said the ground was moving 3 days later. They didn't care if we are dead or alive, they buried.
Smokes.
So now we are in Bochnia. The driver unloads us in the street. And we sit there in the street when Michael sees his school buddy, Farber. Farber was a friend of his who went to school together. And Farber happened to be a Jewish policeman inside the ghetto. The policemen had no weapons. They only had a baton on the side of the leg. Their job was to keep order inside the ghetto. And Farber says, Michael, what are you doing here? And Michael is telling him the story about Nyepalomice. He says, don't worry, I'll find you a place to live. He took Michael and his parents and his two sisters to some place. And he took my father, my mother, myself, my little brother to a place, just one room. And there were 8 other people in that room. So now we were 12 in one room. There were no beds. All they had is straw on the ground, blankets on top of the straw. Blankets were hanging from the ceiling, separating each family. Everybody inside the ghetto had to work. If you didn't work, you didn't get any rations. You die. My job, I was about 13 years old. My job was working in a uniform factory. I was sewing on buttons on uniforms. It was an easy job, but it was 13 hours a day.
13 hours a day.
Very little sleep and very little food. And that went on for over a year.
Wow.
And then Farber, this friendly Jewish policeman, tells Michael and Lola, save yourselves. I heard the rumor there'll be a raid inside the ghetto tonight. When Michael and Lola heard that, they went to hide in a doghouse. You heard right, in a doghouse. I'll tell you the story about the doghouse in a minute.
Okay.
But that's when we found out that our hiding place, our bunker, was this ornate piece of furniture where you hang your coats and jackets. Gail? Yes, this was our hiding place. You open up the door, you push the clothing apart. The back panel was slide apart, and there was a hole in the wall.
Wow.
And the 12 of us could crawl through that hole and stand between two buildings. Lucky for us, the outside of the buildings were connected. The only separation was the roof, the ceiling. It was snowing, it was cold. Of course, the last person had to close the door behind them, push the clothing back, push the back panel back in place. And we stood there all night long, freezing cold, shaking. And we heard shootings, dogs barking all night long, screams. We heard our neighbors are being torn apart by dogs. Towards morning, it got quiet. When it got quiet, we dared to come out. When we came out, we couldn't believe what our eyes are seeing. Our neighbors laying in the snow, torn apart by these dogs. You saw a mother with an infant little child. The mother was still alive. The child was torn apart. And there were people going around in push carts and picking up these bodies and pieces of bodies, putting them in the push carts and taking them to the ghetto square. In the ghetto square, they piled them up as high as they could. And these cultured people would come with gasoline cans, pour gasoline over them, and light a human bonfire in Bochnia Ghetto Square. Do I have to tell you what it was like? There were screams. People were still alive, being burned alive. I knew that Lola and Michael went to this doghouse, so I decided to go to the doghouse. I came to the doghouse, and this is what we saw. Everybody was laying in the snow, dead, with a bullet hole in the middle of their head. Little Marika still holding on to her doll that Lola made her for her 7th birthday.
Oh.
Lola, well, and according to the Jewish religion, you're supposed to bury your loved ones within 12 or 24 hours if you can. So Michael went out and he found this rickety wheelbarrow. They put the family on there, and Lola's pushing the wheelbarrow to the cemetery inside the ghetto. They had a cemetery. At the cemetery, Michael finds a shovel And Lola, with her bare hands, are opening up a grave and putting the family in the grave. And suddenly, Morris Schiller walks up to them. He says, "It wasn't my fault. It wasn't his fault. His own mother, his own sister were also killed." But he says, the grave you dug for your family, you're going to have to take your family out of there because I want it for my mother and my sister. Well, Lola started to cry. But listen, Michael says he has the power over us. Let him go. And they took the whole family out. They put him back on the wheelbarrow, took him to another spot, and started all over again. When they heard the Jeep is coming up the hill, and they stopped at the gate of the cemetery, two husky Nazis jump out, yelling, "Morris Schiller, Morris Schiller." And he walks over to them, "Jawohl, here I am, here I am." They pull out the revolver and they shot him. This is what they did to people who have seen too much. And of course, he has seen a lot. Anyway, after Michael and Lola buried the family, they came down the hill. And down the hill, they saw people in push carts going around and yelling, "Anybody who's alive in the ghetto has to go and register at the Judenrat, at the Jewish station. If you don't register, you're going to die because you're not going to get any rations." Well, the problem is if I tell you the story from this point on, it's going to take another hour. A beautiful story, what happened, how we were able to cross two borders, the border to Czechoslovakia, and from Czechoslovakia, the border into Hungary.
Ben, I'm going to stop you for 1 minute.
Yeah,
Excuse me for this. You keep talking into the corner here, and
yeah.
I want to correct that. Okay,
Bring it in the middle.
there you go.
That's good. That's a good
Okay.
idea.
Mr.
And
Rutzer, are you okay?
Yeah, I'm okay.
Okay.
just readjusted the camera.
Okay.
All right. So now, where was I? Yeah. Actually, I'll tell you the story, what happened.
Coal truck.
While we were outside of the ghetto, Michael, my brother-in-law, befriends a truck driver who was hauling coal. And he asked him if he would convert his truck into a double-decker, coal on top and between the coal and the chassis. People could hide, and he would take him to the border of Czechoslovakia and Poland. And we would have a smuggler waiting for us. We would pay him a lot of money. And he agreed. And he converted his truck to a double-decker. there was room for 10 people inside the truck to hide. 5 and 5 like sardines. The first group of people went, and 10 people, and 8 from the family, 8 from the other family and 2 from our family. Then Michael and Lola went first with 8 other people. Why did they go first? Because you couldn't trust these drivers. They take your money, then they turn you into the Gestapo, and they get ransom money for turning in Jews trying to escape. So they went first, and they had a passport. If the driver comes back with the right passport, trust him. If it's the wrong passport, don't trust him. Sure enough, 2 days later, the driver comes back with the right passport. So now it was time for another 10 people to go in. And my father and mother insisted that I and my little brother Tuli went next. And they were going to go on the 3rd round. So we lay down like sardines, and the truck pulls out about 2 hours outside of Bochnia. We're being stopped. Halt. And we see through the cracks of the trucks, we see soldiers with rifles.
Terrifying.
We felt, oh, if somebody turned us in, they're going to kill us now. When all of a sudden the truck starts to move again, we felt relieved until we saw that on the step of the truck, next to the driver, there's a soldier with the rifle standing there. And now we hear soldiers walking on top of the coal. Whoa. The coal dust is filtering through. I'm catching my little brother's nose and mouth to stop him from sneezing. For 2 hours, they were riding with us, and then the truck stops, and we are saying our prayers already, when suddenly we hear, Dankeschön, Dankeschön. They were hitchhiking, talking about miracles. We had soldiers on top of the coal, on top of the 10 Holocaust, 10 survivors in there. And they didn't know. They were just hitchhiking. So they said left, but they left. They said, Dankeschön, Dankeschön. 2 hours later, we arrived at place at night, and the driver tells us to get out. He says, walk into this forest about 300 yards. You're going to see a tool shed. Inside the tool shed, there's the smuggler. He's waiting for you. All right, he unloaded us. We walked up into the forest. We found a tool shed, and there was a forest ranger inside the tool shed. He happened to be the smuggler. He took us in the middle of the forest. He laid us down on our stomach. He says, look up. And we looked up, and we saw soldiers with rifles going up and down next to barbed wires, and dogs with them. So he says at 3 a.m., they're going to go down the hill, and they're going to meet fresh soldiers down the hill. They're going to have a little memorial, little ceremony. During that 5 and 10 minutes, we can cross the border if you're quiet. If you make a sound, it's all over. Yeah. And sure enough, we saw them go down the hill. After they were away far enough, we started to shimmy our way up on our stomachs back to the barbed wire. The smuggler was holding up the barbed wire, and he told us to cross. But he says at the end of the other side of the barbed wire, there is a big mountain, a drop. Be very careful not to tumble. If you tumble, it's all over. Sit down at the mountain edge, hold hands, and slide down quietly, which is what we did. And when we came, after a while, we reached the plateau. When we reached the plateau, I asked my little brother, "Are you all right?" He says, "Okay." You couldn't see anything. It was all pitch black. Then suddenly somebody taps me on my shoulder. I jump out of my skin. Who in the world, in the middle of nowhere? He says, "Bainish." Well, nobody called me Bainish except my immediate family. He says, "I'm your Uncle Belo, your mother's brother." "Uncle, how did you find us here? In the wilderness, how did you know?" He says, "When Lola and Michael went through 2 days earlier, they contacted us and we came out here. I came out here to meet you and take you across the border from Czechoslovakia to Hungary." That's a long story, so I'm going to skip. Just to tell you, we are now in Hungary, Budapest, Hungary. We meet Lola and Michael there. They were waiting for us. We have a good meal together. And then I had to go, something I hated to do. I had to go to jail in Budapest, in jail, to get legalized. My uncle would put me and my little brother in jail. See, we were minors, and he had to go out in the office and sign for it that he will be our caregiver, you know. All right, so we were now legal in Hungary, and my uncle would vouch for us. He was our guardian. So we were under the guardian of my uncle. Well, next morning, we boarded the train and we were going overnight to Munkacs. Munkacs, where was my mother's side of the family, were all in Munkacs. My sister Goldie, my oldest sister, was in Munkacs. When the war broke out, she was with her grandparents, so she was caught in Munkacs. So she was waiting for us, and we arrived, and the whole family, my uncles, aunts, cousins, everybody was waiting there. And we embraced. And one uncle invited me and my little brother to stay in his house. He was a rich man. He had a yardage goods store where he sold yardage goods for suits and dresses. Above the store, he had his house. So he lived there and he invited us. We went there, And we were waiting for my parents to come with the next transport. 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, 4 months. My parents know they're not coming. One day somebody came over who knew my parents. He knew what happened to them. He told us the story. As they were about to walk into the truck, a farmer in one of those houses saw what happened. They called the Gestapo and they came, they pulled everybody out of the truck. And all 10 people, plus the driver, all 11 were lined up against the building and they were all shot.
Wow.
They were all shot. Life in Hungary was going on like nothing ever happened in the world. Proms, bar mitzvahs, people are going to the temple and they're going in restaurants and eating in public. My God, it was beautiful. 2 months later, the Nazis walked right into Hungary like they were invited guests. The question is why? Why did they go into Hungary? Germany needed every soldier to fight the front. And here they come and occupy a friendly country that means a lot of soldiers away from the front. 75,000 Jews. That was the main reason. But Hitler, to kill Jewish people and pilfer their wealth, was more important at this point than winning the war. And when they came into Hungary, they knew every Jewish person, where they lived, their addresses, their education, their studying. How? There were no computers in those days.
Yeah.
IBM had punch cards, and they would sell these punch cards to anyone who would pay the price. IBM doesn't deny it. They just say they had no idea for what purpose they're going to use those punch cards. Anyway, they told the Jewish people, you will all be relocated to Germany because Germany needs workers. Able-bodied men and women will be working. Students, children will be schooled. Older people will be cared for. Bring along all your valuables that you can carry with you. Leave everything else behind. Anyone found hiding will be shot. Well, most people believed it. They're going to Germany. They brought along all their valuables they could carry. And now they lined us up near cattle cars, 82 cattle car. 80 wouldn't be too bad, but if it were not for all the valises and the bundles, now it was so tight that if you wanted to sit down, someone had to stand up. They had 2 buckets of water in the corner. Once the water was gone, there were no sanitary facilities, no toilets. Imagine 80 people without a toilet. They were starting to use the buckets. and the buckets were overflowing. And it was all over the ground. Now you couldn't sit on the ground because of the human waste. You had to sit on the bundles. We were now happy we had the bundles. 2 days, 3 days. The third night we arrived at a place and we see a sign saying Oświęcim. Oświęcim was Polish for Auschwitz. We don't know anything about an Auschwitz. We never heard of that. We don't know what it is. The train pulled into a yard. There was a gate with a sign, Arbeit macht frei. Labor gives you freedom. Well, that's the gate of Auschwitz. That's the gate of Auschwitz. The train was there a couple hours and then it moved out. That's the gate of Auschwitz. Then it moved out and it moved 2 or 3 kilometers down the road and it stopped at a place called Birkenau. Birkenau was part of Auschwitz. Birkenau was where most of the killing was done in Birkenau. And they open up the doors from the cattle cars and they yell, don't you pick anything up, leave everything on the ground. Women and children to the right, men to the left. I'm holding on to my little brother and my sister, and they were just being pulled away from me, never to see them again. They went straight to the gas chambers. I was 15 and a half. I could have gone with my sister, my little brother. But I figured if this is a labor camp, they want you to labor. And if you labor, they'll give you more food. That was my reasoning. That's the reason I left my sister, my little brother, and I went with my uncle, my cousin, as a man, as an adult. And we see a man with a white frock, like a doctor, white gloves, and he's going right, left, right, left, right, left. Every once in a while, he would ask a question. That was Dr. Mengele, the angel of death. He decided who should live, who should die with a flick of a finger. When I came close enough, I heard him ask a young man, kannst du 5 kilometers laufen? Can you run 5 kilometers? Or would you rather go by truck? This boy says he would rather go by truck. He had a bad knee. They sent him to the right. Poor soul, not realizing that meant death, certain death. Who knew? I didn't know that either. But I figured, why would he ask such a question when I see the barracks are right here? Why would he ask, can you run 5 kilometers? It didn't make sense. I figured he's testing us to see if we're strong enough to work. Yeah. I tell my uncle, my cousin, whatever he asks you, tell him you're strong, you can work, you can run. But let me go first because I spoke German. So I go ahead first. I stretch, remember, I'm 15 and a half. I stretch myself out tiptoe, salute him, and I said with a real grouchy voice, I said, 18 Jahre alt, gesund und arbeitsfähig. I'm 18 years old, I'm healthy and I can work. So he asked me, kannst du 5 kilometers laufen? Can you run 5 kilometers? I said, jawohl, yes. And he sent me to the left. My uncle, my cousin also came to the left. Well, what I didn't tell you is I told my uncle in Munkach before the Nazis ever came in. I told him, Uncle, when Nazis come in, they'll take all your valuables away. It would make sense if you converted some of your valuables into diamonds so we can hide it on our body. And my uncle listened to me. And one day he came home with boxes full of shoes, a pair of shoes for every member of the family. And he told us, no, that in the heels of the shoes, there are diamonds. And if wars think if we can save your life, sometimes they have diamonds in your shoes. But now they sent us to a big auditorium, a big room, and they tell us all to get undressed and walk over to the line of barbers. They'll cut your hair all over and then go into the showers, take a bath, and then they'll tell you what to do. Well, when we came into this big room and they told us to get undressed, get out of your shoes, I had diamonds in my shoes. And my uncle who gave me those diamonds and his son, they went out of the shoes because we were ordered to get out of the shoes. I didn't want to leave my diamonds. So picture this. I'm naked, only beautiful black shoes, and I walk over to the line of barbers. They cut my hair all over. And they didn't say anything about my shoes. Nazi soldiers, guards were walking back and forth and looking at us. It's like God blinded their eyes.
Huh.
They didn't see my shoes. They didn't say anything. I went into the showers with my shoes on. And after the shower, they gave us a pair of shoes with the striped clothes. And those shoes were wooden soles with canvas on top. Anyway, and I took my old shoes and I put it under my arms, under my jacket, and I walked out and they lead us to the barracks. The Stubmeltester, the man in charge of the barrack, comes out and he tells us in a broken German, you Hungarian Jews, you think you're here on vacation? Think again. You see those chimneys, those ashes? Those are your mothers, your fathers, your brothers, and your sisters. And if you don't behave and do exactly what you're told, that's how you're going to wind up, ashes.
Jeez.
I couldn't believe my little brother, my sister, ashes. And they chased us in. Inside, they told us to take a barrack, and my uncle and cousin and I took an upper barrack, and we laid down and we were so tired we fell asleep. An hour later, my cousin wakes me up. Ben, get up, get up, get up. I said, what? He says, listen. And I hear her chanting, crying or laughing. I couldn't make it out. And then he says, look, and he shows me the side of a barrack. One board was missing, and we see flames are shooting up. What is it? I said, I don't know, but I'll find out. I went to the Stubenmeltester because he was a Polish inmate and I spoke Polish. So I walk over and I say, przepraszam bardzo, excuse me, sir, can you tell me what's going on here? What do I hear? What do I see? He says, huh. He says, you Hungarian Jews know nothing. He says, 3 months before Hungary was occupied by the Germans, we in Auschwitz knew that they're going to be occupying Hungary. Why? They had us dig 3 fiery pit ditches for the influx of the Hungarian Jews. They knew they would come in so fast and furious, they wouldn't have time to burn everybody in the crematorium. So they made these fiery pits. And he tells us those are living people being thrown into the fiery pits. And this is what I hear. And he started to tell me all kind of stories, how long it takes to kill a person and in the gas chamber. I didn't even want to know all that, but he kept talking. And he was telling me that it takes 30 minutes to kill a person. They didn't have the time to give us 30 minutes. So after 15 minutes, they saw everybody laying on the floor. They opened the door, aired it out. They had the Sonderkommando come in, pull out the bodies, pull out the gold teeth, check the whole body, and put them on little gurneys, 5 people to a gurney, put a rope on them, and push them on the tracks into the crematorium. But that was too slow of a process because these trains were coming in fast and furious. So they simply threw everybody into trucks full of half-dead people. And they took them to these fiery pits. And they were children. They wouldn't allow the children to go into the gas chambers because they took up too much space. So the children, they pulled away from the mothers as they pushed the mother in. And those live children they were throwing on the truck on top of these dead people, half dead people, and taking them to the fiery pits. And they were throwing. I didn't believe him. I made the biggest mistake in my life. I went out, it was nighttime, threw my barrack in the back, on the side of the barrack, and the other barrack, I saw 3 trucks full of people, and they're throwing in it a little girl alive, screaming. I went back, and that, the memory of what I have seen won't leave me day and night, years. It's always with me. That was my big mistake. Anyway, for 2 weeks, what we went through in Auschwitz, I can't even begin to tell you. We didn't work. Every morning we had to stand naked, and they counted us in rows, and they counted us. And they went through every person looking at us. If we're too skinny to work, they'd pull you out to go into the gas chambers. So they called that selection. Every morning we had to go through that selection. We didn't know if we'll survive the day. After 2 weeks, they put us in trucks, and they took us to a labor camp called Dernau. Dernau was a rock quarry where they dynamited the mountain and boulders were coming down. It was our job with sledgehammers to break these boulders down into manageable pieces and throw it in mining carts and run it down the hill to grinding machine, where they ground it into gravel and then push those carts back uphill. It was terrible work. And I figured my uncle is never going to survive this. So I bribed the chef from the kitchen with my diamonds to give my uncle a job in the kitchen. He took my diamonds and he gave my uncle a job in the kitchen. It got a little easier on us because my uncle could eat in the kitchen and he couldn't take any food out because they were searched, but he could share his ration with his son and me. Anyway, this went on for months. If you come back after work, the kitchen help have to come out and line up with us, and we're all counted. And after everybody was counted, they dismissed us, and we went for our rations and then to our barrack. One night we come back, and my uncle was in the kitchen, but he came out to be counted, stands in front of me, and they count and they count and they count. And the commandant comes down with his Fräulein, his girlfriend. He says, I'm going to show these Schweinhunde a lesson they'll never forget. What happened? 3 inmates escaped. And because of this, he orders his henchmen to pull out every 10th person in line to receive 25 lashes. As they were pulling out every 10th person, I can see my uncle is going to be a 10. So I push him behind me, and I took his place. They took us number 10 in the middle of the yard. The middle of the yard. And they brought out bundles of 1 by 1, about 2.5 feet long, hardwood stakes. And they bring down a sawhorse. That's a sawhorse. And this is what they tell us to do. Tiptoe stand in front of the sawhorse, bend over the sawhorse, but your stomach cannot touch the 2x4. One man would hold your trousers real tight, and the other one starts to hit. And you have to count. If you miscount, you start from 1 again. Anyway, I was number 4. The first one went up. They hit him. And every time they hit him, you can see a line of blood coming through the trousers. These stakes were so sharp. And he screams out, "Eins, zwei." Finally, he miscounted and he falls. His heel touched the ground. He started again. The stomach touches the 2x4 started. He finally falls. When he falls, the commandant goes over, kicks him in the face. "Get up." He couldn't. He pulls out the revolver and shoots him right in the temple. His girlfriend goes over to him, gives him a hug and a kiss, like he just performed the heroic act. He killed a man. Number 2 went up the same way. He miscounted. He touched the floor. He touched the 2x4 again and again. He fell. Commandant goes over, kicks him in the face. "Get up." He couldn't. Shoots him. So we have 2 dead people. Number 3 goes up. Same way. He miscounted. He was a little younger. He yells out, "Please have mercy on me. Don't kill me." Then the commandant says to him, "Then stand up, come over here and face me." The poor guy stands up, makes 3 or 4 steps. His knees gave out from under him, and he falls. The minute he falls, the commandant goes over, kicks him in the face. "Get up." He couldn't. Shoots him. 3 dead bodies. Ben Lesser is next in line. All I remember is I walked up to that sawhorse, tiptoed, bent over without touching it. And I said to myself, "Ben, this is it. You want to live another hour, half hour? You better do exactly the way you're told." I psyched myself out. I don't know how it happened. I think God protected me. I tiptoed, I bent over. One man is pulling my trousers real tight, and the other one starts to hit. And I count, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Finally, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, I made it. Don't ask me how. I made it. The man who was pulling my trousers is telling me in Yiddish, "Go over and thank the commandant." So I walk over. Blood is running down my legs. I come over to him, I salute him, and I say, "Danke schön, Herr Kommandant." When he hears that, he puts his hand on my shirt collar and twists me around, facing the number 10s who are still to be beaten. He says, "Now I told you it could be done. If you do it like this, Jungia, you have nothing to worry about." While this is going on, there is a commotion at the gate. They caught those 3 inmates who escaped, and they were pulling them in. You couldn't recognize them, bloody black and blue. When the commandant saw that, just like a child who gets sick of a toy and throws it away. He told all of us number 10 to go back to our original line. And he tells his henchmen to bring down a portable gallows. And they bring down a portable single gallows. And we had to stand there and watch while they were hanging each one individually. I'll never forget the last one was a little younger. They put the noose around his neck and he screamed out, Shema Yisrael. You know what that means?
No.
Shema Yisrael, that's a Hebrew word, a little prayer saying before you die. So they heard it. They kicked the stool out from under him. They wouldn't let him complete that prayer. God is one. They wouldn't let him complete. They were such sadists. And then, like nothing ever happened, they dismiss us. We go for our rations. We go to our barracks. Like nothing ever happened. For months, I could not lay on my back. I had to lay on my stomach. And one night we heard cannon fire. We heard shooting. We heard like the front is closing in. That morning we reported to go to work. There was a loudspeaker saying, no one is working today. The camp is being evacuated. Line up in rows of fives and march out. I am holding on to my cousin. My uncle's already in the kitchen. We couldn't say goodbye to him. We never saw him again. And now that was called the Death March. The reason they called it the Death March, if you could not keep up marching with the soldiers, they simply shot you. And all day you heard shots all over the place. Don't ask me how I found out that I marched in my death march 7 weeks, 456 kilometers from Dürnhout to Buchenwald. All I remember, we were like zombies. We didn't know day from night anymore. And people were being shot constantly. The last week, my shoes fell apart. So I'm marching in the snow barefooted. And I have to keep up with the soldiers. If I slow down, they'll shoot me. Don't ask me how. I found out from a German professor lately that he knew what happened to us. And he says, I marched 7 weeks, 456 kilometers. I didn't remember that. And we arrived at Buchenwald. They count us and then they dismissed us. They told us to go into this barrack. They're going to feed you. You can take a shower and you can sleep tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. I want you back on the place. This is a picture of me in the shower.
Oh, it's you.
Buchenwald. You see, I have no idea how this happened. Because who took the picture? Must have been a Nazi something, a soldier. Anyway, there's a long story behind that. But now we take a shower and we get fresh clothing, fresh shoes, and we eat, and we leave in the morning, and we line up in rows of fives, because Buchenwald is also being evacuated. So they march us out to a line of cattle cars, and they counted 82 cattle car, and they told us to go in. I pushed my cousin in. He just barely made it. And I tell him to please take a spot what's against the wall, because I remember going to Auschwitz. It was terrible, people all around me. But against the wall, we can rest our back against the wall. He found a spot against the wall, and he saved the spot for me too. I came in, they closed the gates. 2 hours later, they opened them up, and they threw in 80 loaves of bread, a loaf of bread for each person. Picture this. Those people who were next to the door were grabbing 3 or 4 or 5 breads. Those of us against the wall, we had nothing. I don't know where we're going. I don't know for how long. I have to get a bread. So I started to climb over the inmates, over the sitting inmates, over the soldiers, the inmates. And one of the inmates had a pocket knife. He stabs me, and I feel a stab in my throat. I feel my mouth is filling up with blood, but I have to get a bread. I keep going, and then this guy had a bunch of bread. I pulled one away from him. I put it in my back pocket, and I go back to my cousin. My cousin says, Ben, what's happening to you? You're bleeding. I put my finger here, and it went right through my tongue.
Oh.
This day, I have a mark here.
Still there.
I don't know if you can see it.
Yeah.
To this day, I have a mark. But this when I was skinny, was in the middle of my throat. Now I'm filled up. It's over here. It was 80 years ago. My God.
Wow. How did you survive that?
Okay, I have one bread. Every night at midnight, when no one could see me, I give a piece of bread the size of a half an egg to my cousin and a half an egg to me. You don't know how much willpower that takes. When you're that hungry, starving, and you have bread here, and you can hold up 12 hours and 24 hours with one piece of bread the size of a half an egg. It lasted 2 weeks. After 2 weeks, no more bread, no water. 1 day, 2 days. Another week, 3 weeks total, and everybody around me is dead. All the dead people all around me. Out of 80 people, we arrived at Dachau 3 weeks later. Out of the 80 people, only 4 of us walked out alive.
Oh.
I, my cousin, and 2 other people. The rest of them were all dead. That's the barrack I was in the cattle car I was in. Everybody was dead. 4 of us climbed out. Can you imagine that?
No. No.
Why we were still alive, I have no idea. But somehow maybe the bread did it. Even those people who had 5 breads died because they didn't have enough liquid to digest it with. So everybody died. Anyway, they tell us to go into to Dachau camp. When we came in, we see a mountain full of dead skeletons. Apparently, they ran out of coal to burn the bodies, so they just piled them up. And they put me and my cousin next to the pile of dead people in a barrack, next to the dead people in a barrack. Without food or water, they just told us to go in. We sit on the floor. Some of the inmates felt sorry for us and they gave us some water. At least we had a little water they gave us. One day, 2 days, on the 3rd night, we heard a screaming, Befreiung, Befreiung, liberation, Americans, Americans, liberation. I tell my cousin, let's go out and see what's happening. So we hold each other and we come outside and we see the inmates are crawling on their hands and knees and they're kissing the boots of the American GI. They were like gods to us. They liberated us, Americans. And while we're standing there, 2 Americans walk up to me and to my cousin. And one of them had a can of Spam. He opens up the can of Spam. It smelled so good. He hands it to me. We made a mistake. We ate some of it. Both of us came down with dysentery. My cousin dies in my arm the night of liberation. And I keep talking to him. I keep talking to him and I wouldn't let him go. Finally, they saw that he wasn't alive anymore. They came, they took him from me. And I followed. I wanted to know where you're taking my cousin. I made 5 steps and my knees gave out and I fell. They pushed me against the wall. About 2 hours later, a man walks up to me, nicely dressed, and he speaks in a broken German. He wants to know how many languages I speak. So I tell him, he hears Polish. I'm a Polish Jesuit priest. I came here with nuns and doctors from Paris, and we're opening up a field hospital in the yard of Dachau. I'm going to take you to that field hospital. And he picks me up like a sack of bones, which I was. I doubt if I weighed more than 40 or 50 pounds.
Wow.
And he takes me to the infirmary. There was a nun that came out and they laid me down on a cot with a white sheet on it. And they took my vitals and I passed out. 5 weeks later, I wake up in a monastery in Bavaria called St. Ottilian. That's where I woke up 5 weeks later. St. Ottilian, that was monastery. The monks gave up one building to make it into a hospital. And to tell you the rest of the story would take another 2 hours. All I can tell you is please read my book. Read my book, How I Met My Only Sister Alive, my only living sister and I. And she was pregnant and she had a baby. My God. Now we were 4 in the family. My sister Lola, I, and Michael. So to tell you the story, I became a halutz. I think you know what a halutz is, a pioneer. And I was going to Palestine to reclaim the country from where we were dispersed over 2,000 years ago, Judea. It's a whole new story. You have to read, because after liberation, and by the way, this is my lovely wife at our marriage.
Beautiful photo.
Beautiful wife at our marriage. And
Oh.
she passed, unfortunately.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Passed after 72 years of wonderful marriage.
Wow. There you
That
go.
was my sister Lola and I.
That's Lola.
My sister Lola, the only surviving sister. My sister Lola and I are the only survivors from a family of 7.
'94. Wow.
It's my sister Lola's family. They're much bigger now. They're Orthodox, obviously, you can see. And they don't believe in birth control. But this is my family, my immediate family.
Beautiful. You won.
Yeah, my beautiful family. All right. So, and you have any questions or?
My goodness. I mean, of course. I mean, I have to say thank you so much for taking the time to tell me your story. Um, it goes right to my heart, and
it's very important that my story should be heard.
absolutely.
Did you record it?
Yes, I did.
That's good.
Yes, I did. Do you want me to stop recording right now?
Yeah, unless you have questions to ask, which I'll answer.
Well, I do. I was wondering if we can. I would hope to be able to interview one more time later on this week. But I mean, yeah, I mean, how did you survive these camps? How did you cope with this misery and death and destruction, as you were mentioning too? I mean, obviously, this is something that never leaves you. I mean, that's a hell of a ghost to have around for the rest of your life. How did you do this? I mean,
I
you're
just,
to be honored. I mean,
I had a feeling all along that I will survive this. For one thing, I did everything they asked me to do, and I did it well. So they never had an excuse to beat me. I was beaten now and then for no reason at all, but I never gave them an excuse. Maybe that was the reason, but I believe God needed a witness. I believe that's the only reason I survived, because that's why I started the Zachor Holocaust Remembrance Foundation, which means remember the Holocaust.
Zahor, remember.
Zachor means remember. And that was, I'm believing, I'm strong believers that God needed a witness, someone who can talk about it. And it hurts me too. I have sleepless nights. But I made up my mind for as long as I can, for as many people as possible, I want to tell the story. They should know what happened from a Holocaust survivor directly.
Yes. Thank you.
The Zachor Foundation is very active, very active. This little pin, Zachor, means remember. We have given out over 2 million of these to all our listeners and persons that receive.
Beautiful. I will wear one. I will wear one. I'm going to keep talking to you for a second, Ben. I'm just going to stop recording. Thank you so much for this.